Thank you all for being here. It's a particular pleasure for me to be here and my alma mater. I have a little white and purple going here. And also a particular pleasure to be with diplomats with decades of experience in a region that I covered for more than a couple of decades. And I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the rather provocative focus of our evening, the case for America First. And of course, for many of you, this may raise the question of, is there a case for America First? And if so, what does it look like? We'll get to that. So the United States, since World War II, as we all know, has played a uniquely prominent role globally, creating and supporting international institutions, participating in other international institutions, groupings, and initiatives, NATO, NAFTA, APEC, ASEAN, the Arctic Council, and more, maintaining a military presence. The U.S. has 800 military bases in some 70 countries. That's as compared to Britain, France, and Russia that have 30 combined, and China, which has 1 at the moment in Djibouti, and 1 that's a little less official in Tajikistan. The U.S. has played a really important role throughout its existence in welcoming immigrants. Sometimes we've been more welcoming than other times, but many of Silicon Valley's successful startups were started by immigrants, especially from your countries, in fact. And Asian scholars and researchers in the United States have added richly to our knowledge and global knowledge, have won Nobel Prizes. Asian writers, actors, artists, and filmmakers have been deepening our understanding of the human condition and human experience. But we're at a moment now when our president says that America hasn't been treated fairly in the world and that the wrong kinds of people are coming. At least some of the people who are coming are the wrong kinds, and he calls this his America First policy. I guess my first question then is, what does the America First policy mean to each of you, and how has it affected your countries so far? Can I start with you?
China first.
Yes, China
first. It's not politically right in the United States. Thank you, Mary. I should ask the Consul General anyway.
Go ahead.
On behalf of the Chinese consulate, Consul General Wang is in Oregon for a visit. So, answer your question, American first. In fact, it is natural and normal for any heads of state of any country to put their national interests and the well-being of their own people priority. It's no exemption for China and all the other countries. But as you mentioned, that international cooperation is also important. If America first means that American continue to take the lead in shoulder more international responsibility to cope with more international challenge like climate change, cross-border criminal cases and drugs and illegal immigrants. So we believe all of us will applaud American first, take the lead. But I believe American first, putting the American people's interest first, also need the international cooperation. Yeah, this morning, before I came here, I tried to check because your president called for Made in USA and Hire USA. I tried to see whether we can only come with Made in USA or Made in China. I check everything from mobile phones and trousers like a jacket. If Made in USA, only Made in USA, I can only bring my iPhone here.
Yeah.
So my tie and a jacket is from Italy. Trousers, thanks to my wife. And the shoes is from a British brand. So some from Vietnam. Yeah, thank you. That's a good example. Yeah, thank you.
Consul General, yeah.
Oh, my name is Uyama. I'm the Consul General of Japan, and I'd like to thank the Asia Society for hosting this very interesting event. it's quite challenging. Normally, at this kind of meeting, I normally say that don't take any notes or don't end records. But today is a little different, so I try my best. But thank you for the question. And as everyone knows, Japan and the United States fought war in the World War II. But after the war, we became a very good friend. And San Francisco is a peculiar place. In 1951, we had a very important treaty of San Francisco Peace Treaty. We came back to the international community. And also, Japan and the U.S. Signed Japan-U.S. Security Treaty, which is now still the foundation of the security policy of Japan. And as is mentioned by the moderator, we have quite a number of American military bases in Japan, and not just for protecting Japan, but it's a foundation of this peace and stability in Asia. And the America First is something quite, I think, a domestic. Partially it's a rhetoric, but partially it's something real. But I think it does not itself say accurate what it's going to say, because any country, of course, have a national interest first. And so I think it's really, we need to really find out what it means in each of the different stage. And as far as Japan and the U.S. Relations concerned, we have a very excellent cooperation. And of course, we don't agree on everything, but we had an opportunity to talk and discuss and try to coordinate our policy. So, so far, I think, although there are certain issues, but overall, I think it's going very well now. Thank you.
So no adverse effect on Japan at this point?
Well, as I said, it's maybe I may have a small chance to talk about certain details, but there are some differences. For example, we really wanted to have a environment in East Asia and Asia Pacific where the business people have predictability and a high level of rule. And the TPP was actually the important Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement. Actually, it entered into force, unfortunately, without the United States earlier this year. Was the kind of instrument where such a very high level of trade liberalization and very high level of rules, including the protection of intellectual property, can be realized. And so far, unfortunately, U.S. decided to withdraw from there, but CITES still remains, and we're ready to receive U.S. when he changes his mind. But this is one of the sort of example of some differences we have.
Okay. So Joon-yong Park,
Yes.
I mean, both South Korea and Japan have a significant U.S. military presence and have relied on the U.S. to some extent to provide stability in the region. How are you and your government reading the America First policy and how it affects your sense of security within the region?
In my view, making America great again or America First seems to be Mr. Trump's vision rather than foreign policy. Under this new vision, the basic line of Trump administration's policy doesn't seem to be very far from the traditional one of the U.S. government, with a few exceptions. First of all, the U.S. Homeland Security must be a top priority, and the U.S. still wants to secure its strategic and economic interest abroad, and the U.S. still wants to prefer free and fair trade, and also the U.S. wants to is willing to take the lead in tackling many global issues, if not all of them. And I think in Asia policy, the U.S. still remains unchanged in its goals. So the U.S. wants to maintain the peace and stability in the region in cooperation with allies and security partners. US also wants to expand its economic relations with ASEAN countries for mutual benefit. So in this context, Korea and the US have shared common goals and values, and have been developed into a deep-rooted political, economic, and military alliance. I think even under the Trump administration's so-called America First policy, I think the Korea-U.S. alliance will prosper.
So you're saying the U.S. hasn't changed its core goals, but it certainly has changed its approach on the Korean Peninsula. I mean, President Trump meeting Kim Jong-un at the DMZ, at Panmunjom. How do you read that?
Yes, our two governments have been very well coordinated to push forward with that agenda. So far, there has been many changes on the Korean Peninsula, and now we are expecting a working level negotiation between the United States and North Korea to come. We really hope that the issue of North Korea's denuclearization can make big progress in a very short time.
Consul General Panda.
India last.
How is America First affecting you?
No, that's, no. What I meant to say that India has the last word. Okay. Okay. Thank you, first of all, Asia Society of organizing this. Brilliant to have the four Asian countries. In fact, 21st century is termed as the Asian century. So, now when you're talking about America First and how we look at it, I mean, this is nothing new. I mean, it was actually President Woodrow Wilson who first talked about it. So it's very natural, and I agree with my colleagues when they say that for any country, national interest and the domestic compulsions are what really prompts your foreign policy priorities. So America First is something which, if you look at it very realistically, every country worth its salt would also look at, like if it is Prime Minister Modi, he might be talking about neighborhood first, but it's understood that it was always India first because Indian national interest is paramount. But there is something from the Indian perspective that we feel that if America First is to mean the isolationist policy, inward-looking, then that is something which is a little dangerous for the simple reason that from the Indian ethos, there's a term that we use which is called Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which means world is one family. So which means that in today's world, I mean, you cannot have the isolationist policy. We have to be together. We have to meet the challenges together, and we have to face things together. For example, if India is aspiring to become a 5 trillion economy by 2024, we cannot possibly be saying that we'll do it while we are in a cocoon.
Right. So many Asian countries, but yours in particular, have had extraordinary growth in the last 20, 30 years, have developed a thick web of relationships within Asia. And in many ways, I mean, what used to be a much more hub and spokes kind of relationship where the U.S. had relations with these different countries. Now you have various groupings within the region and strong bilateral relationships. And I'm wondering whether you would make a case for Asia first, and if so, what that looks like in the Asian century, or do you think that would be counterproductive because other regions would get annoyed?
You know, this when we actually talk about regional groupings, then we are forgetting the world as a whole. Because we are no longer, these barriers are artificial barriers created, this national frontiers. These have no meaning. I mean, especially in a globalized world, we cannot even talk about regional groupings. Yes, groupings are important for the simple reason that you grow together and the benefits accrue to all. But at the same time, the regional groupings have to deal with the groupings outside the region, with the countries outside the region. In that sense, if you have a grouping like the Indian Ocean Rim Association, it has to have a seen in a wider context. And now, when this Indo-Pacific concept has evolved, it's actually more than a geographic construct. It is an idea. It is a thought process. I mean, it has both strategic. It is, you can explain it from a strategic viewpoint as well as a major economic angle to it.
Yes, thank you very much. I think obviously, compared with 20, 30 years ago, Asia has more weight in the international politics. And I think Asia is more sort of playing an important role in constructing the rule-making and in the international community, for example. And for example, if we take about the trade liberalization, I'm sorry, India is still not a member. We have a group called APEC, and quite often, whatever the WTO can agree, certain new rules or improving its rules or liberalization, it's normally initiated discussion in APEC. Whatever APEC is initiated discussion, then moving to the Geneva and WTO. So this is kind of one of the examples. And so Asia is not really making a new bloc, but we are sort of trying to play a more important role that contribute to the global agenda. So that's happening, I think, so year by year. The role of Asia is, I think, is stronger, and it's continue for some time. And also, since my Indian colleagues mentioned the Indo-Pacific agenda, I think this is quite important. I totally agree. This is not kind of a sort of a coalition of certain country versus another. It's more the value attached to the value or principle, including the freedom of navigation, or free trade, rule of law. Those are the kind of core value principle that the concept of Indo-Pacific concept. And the purpose is, again, try to create an environment, a predictable environment, where all the people in the world can benefit from there, to encourage more business and encourage more infrastructure, which is open and transparent. And so this is the kind of role I think Asia should be doing more, and to try to have represent the universal value.
So one of the transformative things that's happening in Asia and beyond right now is China's Belt and Road project, the new Silk Road, building out infrastructure in some 70 countries. And there's not just the physical infrastructure, there's the digital Silk Road, the science Silk Road, the space Silk Road, even the Arctic Silk Road. I'm wondering, I'd like to come to you last, but I'd like to first ask how you're seeing the Belt and Road, how it's affecting your country's interests. How much are you seeing opportunities? How much are you seeing potential risks? How is it transforming the region? And is it in ways that you think would be conducive to helping stability and prosperity in the region?
Are you looking at India?
Please,
okay.
Go first.
No, we have a little difficulty in not or the Belt and Road Initiative per se, but in being a part of it, for the simple reason that it covers an area in what we call the Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. So it's the CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. So since we do not recognize that, and that is why India obviously doesn't embrace BRI. But having said that, if this connotes development and developing without any strings attached, and how it evolves, how much it has flown, we are obviously keeping a watch on it. But obviously we cannot embrace that for the reasons that I specified. But again, so far as US is concerned, there are other, there is a, as you were aware, there is a public-private partnership in the ASEAN context, and where there's a fund which is being created for developing infrastructure. So we feel that it is also, I mean, it is not only that you have to look at BRI or look at anything through the prism of BRI. There are other avenues also where development can take place. For example, so far as India is concerned, we have in fact a fund and which is earmarked for very taking up development projects in many of the in many African countries. So similarly, I feel that there could be other balancing initiatives which should also be looked at seriously.
Well, and indeed, there's one in Sri Lanka, right? I mean, so China now is in control of the Hambantota port for the next 99 years. India and Japan, right, are building out another port in Colombo.
Work in progress.
Work in progress. Consul General Park, how is the Belt and Road looking in South Korea?
Yes, I still remember in 2013 when the initiative was suggested by China. This issue was not so complicated in interpretations, but later this initiative was combined with many other suggestions raised by the Chinese government, and then the world started looking at that initiative from a different perspective, and now I think BRI and the Indo-Pacific strategy seems to be a little bit confronting from each other. But my view is that the Chinese BRI has two aspects. One is beneficial to the neighboring countries, and the other aspect would be the political one that which China might have in their mind. So maybe the neighboring countries, including Korea, can look into the connotations of which projects in specific would be comfortable in cooperating with China, I think. But there are economic ramifications also. There are political ramifications also. Broadly, I can say that Korea is eager to cooperate with the BRI projects, which would be beneficial to neighboring countries.
BRI, incidentally, Belt and Road Initiative. So when you hear that acronym, that's what they're referring to.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think there are a lot of issues on the news reports and so forth, but I think apparently the core part of the Belt and Road initiatives is enhancing the connectivities between countries. And so a lot of construction of the infrastructure is involved. And it is true that in many parts of the world, and particularly in Asia, there are a lot of needs to build more infrastructure. So in that respect, supporting building such an infrastructure is really important. And we are doing also supporting infrastructure. And what is actually might raise concern is that sometimes making such an infrastructure lacks transparency, and sometimes lacks a certain, as you just said in Sri Lankan case, the lack of financial sustainability for the recipients. And there should be more sort of dialogues so that the recipients will be able to be in a position to return those funds they borrowed from. And also, there are sometimes the fear of this lack of consideration of environment or lack of consideration of social impact. So all these kind of issues. I think we also experience all these. And there are a lot of experiences by doing ODA or non-ODA loans, making infrastructure. And they are accumulated sort of experiences. So I think it's very important to sharing those experiences and creating certain principles to ensure that it's good to support the infrastructure, but on the basis of certain principles. And for that, right, with the participation of China or Korea and India and many others, Japan hosted the G20 summit meeting in Osaka, and we agreed the Osaka declaration and the agreed documents. I think very few of them have ever read it, but if you're interested, please read them. And one of the things we agreed is a principle to the of this infrastructure. And we are watching very carefully, but I think with this, there are a lot of things we can support for building such infrastructure.
Okay. Faqiang, what do people need to understand about the Belt and Road? How do you think it's misunderstood?
Belt and Road, thank you. Belt and Road initiatives is a public product initiated by China. It's initiated by China, but not dominated by China. It belongs to the world, and the purpose is to benefit all, as mentioned by Consul General, that we try to enhance, facilitate the communication, transportation, and upgrading the people's livelihood. It is the old saying that if you want to be rich, you must first build the road. And another Chinese saying that if you want to be rich, you should also help your neighbor be rich. Otherwise, you cannot sell goods and you cannot do business. That's the purpose of China. And it is also follows the suit of many Western countries. We learn from the world, from the United States, from France. The Panama Canal, the Suez Canal connect all the world, facilitate the world trade, benefit to all, and also the U.S. as a whole will inside the country as a whole will transcontinental highway system. Yeah, we just follow the suit of the Western countries, of other countries, and also encouraged by many countries. When China become richer, you should there more responsibility to provide more public products. It's one of the public products. If you give me one more minute, I want to say a little bit about Sri Lanka, because before I came here, I'm deputy head of mission of China in Sri Lanka for 3 years. I can tell that there's no so-called debt trap in Sri Lanka. I'll give you an example. Nearly all the infrastructure, a large quantity of infrastructure, electricity, water drainage, clean water systems, the first railroad after their independence for 60 years, and the first highway, and more than 20 countryside road benefit all people, is financed and constructed by Chinese companies at the invitation of Sri Lanka at the competition of the international bank. Every time because of India, that India is a big brother of Sri Lanka, a good neighbor, and every time Sri Lanka pay respect to India, every time there's one project, they ask India first, and also ask China second. So India first. I know. And also some international bid will be held, and China, some Chinese companies join the international bid and win the contract. We hire the local people. 95% are the local people. So every people benefit. The two lights are, the last sentence is the two lights in every Sri Lankan's family. There is one light generated by Chinese financed and technologically supported, not actually coal power plant. We finished that in just 3 years.
So the infrastructure that China helped to build has had a positive effect in Sri Lanka, but it is also true that Sri Lanka couldn't make its loan payments, and part of the agreement with China was that the one way to pay part of what Sri Lanka owed was to have China take control of the port and some of the surrounding area for 99 years, right?
It's a tough question, but I know the answer.
Okay.
That's Hambantota. That's Hambantota. Hambantota, China, is a port belong to Sri Lanka. After we finished building the port, we cannot move the port to China. Nor can we send our ships to make Hambantota a military basis. No, it's only we can. It's 99 years. 99 years is not as a colony that Great Britain occupies Hong Kong. No, it only means you shoulder more responsibility. Sri Lanka occupy 51% of the share, and we 49. And general manager, the two sides that we share. And China attracted all over the world. It's our responsibility with our cooperate with our Sri Lankan friends to attract. We establish a industrial free zone, free industrial zone to try to attract investment from all over the world. If Bank of Silicon Valley want to invest, of course.
Okay. Mr. Panda, you had your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that just before coming here, I was in Delhi in the foreign ministry and looking after the Indian Ocean region, and Sri Lanka and Maldives was part of my charge. So I actually worked very closely. And what you said, that's perfectly understandable. But I'm telling you what the Sri Lankans feel and Sri Lankans say. Because with interaction that we have had, they feel that they've got into you said there was no debt trap. How they have got into, they've got into some economic difficulties, and thanks to getting into this loan situation. I mean, coming to Hambantota port, it's a fact that India was asked first. Then we did our due diligence and found that it is not economically viable to have a port there. I mean, so, we didn't look at the strategic part at that time because there was too much a price to pay. And we thought, no, the country would probably think of having a port there. It didn't make economic sense. But then there was a lot of, the funds, the debt which the Sri Lanka government got into. And eventually, when you cannot repay the debt turns into equity. And then obviously the ownership. Now, on the point that 51% is Sri Lanka and 49% is Chinese company. It's
Chinese
actually...
Company. Not Chinese government.
No, not Chinese government, Chinese company. Okay. So it is actually, there are two agreements. The first agreement where there's both agreements, the Sri Lankan has 51%, that is perfectly all right. But the Chinese company, there's a consortium in the second agreement. I mean, the first was on looking after all the regulatory issues and other things, and the second one was on commercial matters. But there's a Chinese company which is part of the Sri Lankan consortium. So effectively, the controlling stake is with the Chinese company. So this is, if you have to, all these are actually available, these agreements in public domain, but the point is nobody analyzes this further. But that's besides the point. What is important, what the Sri Lankan government has got into. The Sri Lankan government has got into a situation that the question of repaying this loan is impossible, so they have got into equity. It's a fact that China has contributed substantially in creating infrastructure in Sri Lanka. There's no denying that. But then it makes a little sense to study at what price and then look at the narrative. So it's for a country to really understand and make its calculation how the development what is the path to take to development? So.
Yeah, let me ask a question, and it's for you, so you can then add whatever
China
you were
first
about to
again.
say. It is actually China first related. So whatever the actual agreement was in Sri Lanka, and you saying, actually Sri Lanka has benefited from the infrastructure investment, the perception in many countries is, whoa, we need to be careful with the Belt and Road. China says this is going to be a win-win. We're thinking it's a double win for China. I was hearing this when I was in Malaysia last year during the election and in the rallies that happened before the election that brought Mahathir back to power. So when you're thinking about a future where China is a predominant power in the region as one possible future, and I think a lot of players in the region, a lot of countries, a lot of individuals, certainly who I've talked to, think that that's kind of the direction where Asia may be going. How do you reassure others in the region that whatever your conception is of China first, and I'm asking if there is a conception of China first, I'm going to ask each of you about, if instead of America first, there was your country first, what would that mean? What would it look like? Is that even something that you would consider having as a policy beyond the fact that countries look after their own interests? How do you deal with the perceptions, you writ large, the Chinese government, that the Belt and Road, whatever its actual positive impact in terms of infrastructure, feels sometimes like it's much more in China's interest than it is in the interests of those on the receiving end?
Belt and Road initiatives is not perfect. Some economists told me that if 60% or 80% of this project is a win-win and make profit and not lose money, that's very good. But our record today is better than that. Hambantota is only one leaf of a big tree. And second point is for the debt. You can check at the internet what's the percentage of China debt in the total debt of Sri Lanka. It's a small margin. It's a small margin. And the interest of the debt is quite low. The third point is that China don't like some international monetary organizations, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. We do not put prerequisite for the receiving country when we give the loan to them. They told me, Sri Lankan friend told me that when China provided the investment assistance, they give us a whole sausage. But for the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, they are quite careful, of course. The good governance, the education conditions, and other. They cut the sausage into pieces, one by one you give to them. But the infrastructure development, they shouldn't wait. They could not wait 5 years, 10 years to build the infrastructure. So if you are in Sri Lanka's shoes, in the developing country's shoes, if one country give you the whole sausage and help you to build the infrastructure, which rich people and poor people can use the infrastructure, the roads, A9 road connecting Jaffna to Colombo, so that Jaffna Mongol can easily, in 7 days, not 7 minutes.
You just had the chime, but I'm going to give you one more minute with the question again. Is there a case for China first, and if so, what is it?
China first means China want to shoulder more responsibility and take the lead, want to seeking common ground while putting aside the differences, want to seeking common development of all countries. When we putting our national interest first, we also respect other countries' co-interest and their concerns. We are seeking a win-win and a multiple win. That's our purpose. Thank you.
Uyama.
Thank you very much. With regard to the development assistance, actually, I myself has been involved in the development assistance program with Japan for quite many years. Not just in Tokyo, but also when I was stationed in overseas, including in the Philippines, and also was in Egypt. We were kind of robust bilateral economic cooperation programs. And actually, Japan was a little sort of latecomer for this world 20 years ago or so. And our way of doing economic cooperation is a little different from the traditional donors that was before us. We attach very much importance to how the recipient think, how the priority of recipient. That's the most important. And we spend a lot of time on the dialogue with the recipient countries. And also what we did was also to try to explain to other donors what we are doing and try to coordinate with other donor countries. And because we are members of OECD, there's a group called the DAC, Development Assistance Committee, where there's a lot of occasions, almost daily, talking about each of the development programs. There are differences, but there are sort of way to how we can learn each other. And so for us, I think it's very important, for example, China to reappreciate, to increase its overseas assistance and to contribute to building infrastructure. But it's also important, I think, China to be involved more with the donor community. And I think it's okay. China has a different view. But it's very important for this to be more explained to other donors, and just not in the headquarters, but also each of the recipient country situations. I think this will help more and to learn each other, and maybe more good understanding to an appreciation by other countries. And do I have to answer the question of Japan first?
Yes, please.
Well, yeah, thank you. I think it's very similar to what a Chinese colleague is saying. That, I don't think we have a kind of campaign, sort of promise of Japan first or something like this. But we have, of course, our diplomacy, maybe at the same time, same thing for any country. We try to maximize the national interest. But that does not mean at the expense of other interests of other countries, but try to look at the situation in a very objective manner and what people are doing, and try to understand our policy, and then try to maximize our national interest in a very realistic way. That's, I think, we've been doing, and we would like to continue doing.
So there has been discussion and debate in Japan about Japan putting its own security interests first in the sense of potentially becoming more militarily active. And this is a very active debate in Japan.
Yes and no.
Okay.
And in a sense, right after World War II, various situations, we didn't have any military power at the time. But of course, like many other countries, there was a discussion that we can't just stand and do nothing when there is aggression from outside. So there should be a sort of minimum power, self-defense forces, we call it, to defend ourselves. And then later, there are more sort of calls to contribute to the international peace and security. And we then decided to increase our contributions to peacekeeping operations and others. And this is sort of historic discussions, and it's still going on, that's right. But I think it's not so much to sort of put Japan first or something. It's more in the context of how Japan should contribute to the peace and security, the regional peace and security in the world.
Okay. Is there a case for South Korea first?
First, let me briefly touch upon China first.
Okay.
We are targeted.
You're popular.
Yeah. China is very popular, actually, among the Asian countries because Chinese economic boom has contributed to world economy, including the Asian economy. And China's proactive participation in the world non-proliferation system has prompted a safer life of the people. And also Chinese, a huge number of Chinese people going abroad has enabled tourism industry to be boosted in many countries, actually. And the Chinese abundant cultural heritage also has enriched the life of the people. So in this context, Korea has been one of the main benefactors of China's openness policy. And I think China would remain a very important partner for Korea because in the future, because we are close neighbors and we share many common interests. And Japan also a very close neighbor, culturally and economically and geographically. Actually, overall, we have a great potential for across the board cooperation for the benefit of both people and the world. And if Korea takes a Korea first policy, I think we would focus on, as you know, establishing a permanent peace regime on the Korean Peninsula, including denuclearizing North Korea. And then maybe our government would make every effort to spur our economy by creating favorable environment, including free and fair trade. And the third, maybe we can, make our efforts to maintain the stability and co-prosperity in the region by establishing and mobilizing more forward-looking cooperation bodies with the neighboring countries.
So both in South Korea and in Okinawa and Japan, there's been some pushback to U.S. military presence, continued U.S. military presence. And President Trump has said about South Korea, hey, why do we have so many troops there? You know, maybe we should reconsider this. In that way that America First has at least been playing out verbally, what has the reaction been in South Korea?
Yeah, even everybody knows, everybody has noticed that Mr. Trump has already began talking about that during his election campaign. But at the moment, we are facing a related issue of sharing the budget for U.S. troops stationing in Korea. And last year, we successfully concluded the agreement on the amount of increasing the budget. And maybe this year or next year, we are going to have another round of negotiations on that. I think it reflects what President Trump said about that reflects on his strong interest in U.S. economic interests. So I think it does not necessarily mean that Mr. Trump is going to withdraw his troops from South Korea or Japan, because maintaining U.S. troops in that region is very critical for the United States regional strategic interest.
I'll get you in just 1 second.
Yes.
Could either of you imagine in East Asia and Asia Pacific where U.S. troops are not present in South Korea or Japan? Mr. Park.
Sorry. Yes.
Could you imagine an Asia Pacific region where U.S. troops are not present, where U.S. isolationism, taken to its logical conclusion, ends up with the withdrawal of troops?
People don't imagine that the U.S. troops would be withdrawing from South Korea. And we firmly believe that the U.S. and South Korea share the common interest by maintaining the U.S. military presence in that region, in maintaining stability and co-prosperity in that region. And I think, I guess Japan has the same view.
Yeah, I think like the same, but as earlier, as Mr. Panda said, if the America First means in East Asia, as isolationist policy is introduced in Asia, I think that's a problem, and including withdrawing troops from there or withdrawing the commitments to Asia. That would be a huge problem. And so far as I know, that's not the case. So we are very much confident that you're still making very deep commitments, and including the military presence in East Asia with Korea and Japan. So I don't have any really problem so far on that basis in a fundamental sort of policy. It doesn't look like a very isolationist, but it's more sort of commitments. We're looking at Asia situations. That's how I feel.
Okay. Is there a case for India first?
Well, first of all, I can't help but compliment Consul General Park, a perfect diplomat. I mean, the way you put everything positive, everything nice. I wish the world was like that. I mean, I got reminded of John Lennon, it's such an ideal, but I feel that sometimes the ideal falls short of the actual. Anyway, I'll not elaborate further. I am also a good diplomat. Coming to India first. As I mentioned, for every country, if they do not think that they are the first, I mean, they have to look at their interest first, then there's something drastically, fundamentally wrong there. But some countries, they articulate it. Some countries, they do not articulate it. India has never articulated India first. But, of course, we say that, okay, world first. But heart of hearts, we know India first. But it gets along, so the world has to be together with India, so we all grow together, whatever it is. So when I mentioned that coming to India first, when our Prime Minister articulates neighborhood first, when he says we have a lookist policy, actist policy, if we embrace Indo-Pacific, then obviously these are all feeding into India first, feeding into our national interest. For example, with China, China was and continues to be our largest trading partner. I mean, if you see the Chinese presence in India, in the Indian marketplace, I mean, you cannot imagine. I mean, it's all over the place. China has a huge presence in India, and India now has a huge presence in China. There are, the way the Indian movies are faring in China, the Bollywood is now looking at China first. I mean, so this is, it's a very complex kind of a thing. So you cannot really say that we look at India first. Yes, we look at it. We don't articulate it. Some countries prefer articulating it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to, I leave it to your guests.
So the two of you represent, sorry, go ahead.
I should be more.
Right of reply.
I should be a better diplomat, actually. India, even though India is a country, a little bit far from our country geographically, but we have developed a very good relationship, including Yay with a different name. And the last year, our two-way trade volume reached 18 billion US dollars. And the two peoples have very friendly sentiments, I think. The high-level official exchanges are very frequent. So I think the future of our two relations is very bright. And now I became more better.
No. There was no reference to that.
Okay.
You just put everything in the positive. I wish I could do that.
So we're going to go to questions from you in a few minutes, but I have another question for you all first, and that is, obviously, Mr. Ren, Mr. Panda, you represent countries with 1.3, 1.4 billion people each. India's population is much younger. It's starting to enjoy its demographic dividend. China's got extraordinary experience in building out infrastructure. It's got a big strength there. Both countries are poised in different ways to play extremely important roles in the 21st century. So this is sort of an omnibus question, but do you feel that going forward, the region and the world will be more multipolar than it is now? And in that kind of a world, if that is what you expect, do you expect that there's going to be one significant big power that's going to kind of play the role the United States has played? Do you think there will be several different powers that will be working together or working at cross purposes? Do you think that the prevailing sort of energy is going to be competition or finding ways to cooperate? I mean, kind of how are you seeing the medium to long-term future going forward in the region and the role that the U.S. will play in it? Let me start with you.
I'm quite positive that the Asian Pacific regions will become more and more multilateralism, and the regional economic integration will take further steps. First, the existing mechanisms such as ASEAN, APEC, 10+1 and 10+3, and the East Asia Summit. We can work together in all these existing mechanisms. Second, we should develop a more free trade zone, like the negotiation. We hope a free trade agreement can be reached among Japan, South Korea, and China. And maybe in the future, right now we have free trade agreement with ASEAN countries, with Australia, with New Zealand, and other countries. Maybe in the future with our Indian friends.
Inshallah.
Indian friends.
And role of the U.S. in the world and in Asia Pacific?
U.S. is an important member, equal member at least, of the Asian Pacific. It belongs to the Asia Pacific family. It has the historical influence and programmatic interest of in this country, the U.S. interest. That we respect the influence and the interest. And we want to cooperate with the U.S. as a major player, one of the largest trading partner of all of our three countries. Yeah.
Although the Chinese government has, on more than one occasion, called the U.S. a hegemon and has said, it's time actually for Asians to be the ones who are in control in Asia, that the U.S. shouldn't be playing as prominent a role as it has been playing for the last 50 to 70 years?
We encourage the U.S. to play a more constructive role in the U.S., in the Asian Pacific region. Yeah, we hope that the U.S., the Asian policy could be more, not only pragmatic, but more constructive when putting American first, also put other countries' interest in concern, so that seeking common ground, common interest, so that we can develop together, prevail together.
Yeah. Let me just go down the line.
Thank you. We also think the U.S. continue to have play an important role, and the growing center of the United States is California, and California is facing the Pacific. And many people from Asia is very active, playing a role in the growth of California and the growth of the United States. And so therefore the U.S. is, in a sense, it's a Pacific country. So we are sort of colleagues to each other to create a new Pacific region. And also true that given the current high level of growth continues in Asia, not just India or China, but also ASEAN countries and many other Asian countries, including like Bangladesh. Asians' weight is increasing. That's a definite thing. So, like what Mr. Ren said, I think it's very important to create really attach importance to the rule of law, creating new rules, including those trade and investment. And as he also said, we're negotiating Japan, China, Korea, APFTA, but also we are negotiating what we call RCEP, covering all 4 countries plus Australia and New Zealand and ASEAN. So I think we are attaching importance to creating those, to attach importance to make new rules. And they also importance to not just free trade, but also navigation, freedom of navigation, and the human rights and so forth. And so we also attach importance to Indo-Pacific region for that concept. It's a concept-oriented.
Okay.
Thank you.
Having said that, China has contributed to not only Asia but also world's economic boom. I have to point out that in accordance with China's rise, actually a certain level of power shift is taking place among Asian countries and between the United States and China. So now Asian countries are concerned that their national security and economic vitality would be impaired. Like other Asian countries, South Korea also wants to see the environment favorable to maintain the peace and prosperity in the region. So I think all the countries should think and behave in a cooperative and accountable and forthright way. And if you have good ideas to solidify the ties among the countries, it should be institutionalized. And the behaviors or actions taken by every country should be based on the principles of openness and transparency, and also the inclusiveness, and also should be based on rules-based order. Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely, but there are certain things which we cannot overlook. The fact that United States has a preeminent role in the global order, that is something which is accepted. 24% of the global wealth is confined here. But having said that, we know how it has moved from Cold War to the post-Cold War, bipolar world to unipolar. And yes, we are moving in the direction of multipolar world. But the multipolar world which we are moving into is going to be very different. It's going to be very different because there are some global challenges which all of us are confronted with, and it has to be concerted effort is required. So if we only look at country X first, then there is a difficulty there, and we cannot afford to do that. Actually, I'll give you one example now. The crisis which the entire world, we are talking about terrorism, we're talking about many other things, but the number one crisis in the world is actually the water crisis. Mm-hmm. How many people realize that? And the way we are moving, a water crisis from rural areas, people move to urban areas, it becomes unmanageable, and then underemployment, and this is following a particular pattern. So we don't have a choice. We don't have a choice but to work together in unison and work together, concerted effort, round the clock, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I mean, I say 24/7. Today is 7/24. Okay. So on the right day. So you take this pledge on this day, and that's the answer. So you cannot really say that we are moving towards a multipolar world. Multipolar world with a global concern and global. It has to be unified. So there's a different role with the reformed United Nations will have to play.
So the case for America first, if there is one, is keep your interests in mind, but stay globally engaged, be respectful, be constructive.
Perfectly summed up.
Great. Questions? Way over here. The woman with her hand up on the 1, 2, 3, 4th row. Yes.
Hi, I'm Christina from Startups Greater Asia. We connect tech companies in the Valley with Asia. And so my question is, in your diplomatic role and given the increasing importance of technology, what, and all this policy issues, trade war going on, but what are some things that you would like, U.S., Western companies to know about your respective countries?
Can I?
Please.
That's a very interesting question, and I must confess that when I wanted to come to San Francisco, I was actually looking at the Silicon Valley and a huge jurisdiction, but I was primarily technology and innovation interested me, and I knew that India has a major thirst for technology and to absorb this technology to meet our developmental challenges. So having said that, now for example, I'll give you a very simple example. Now this 5G rollout has happened, and we know that everyone is looking at India as a major market for the 5G rollout. But what people don't realize that India doesn't have the infrastructure to absorb 5G to optimally, commercially optimally India to benefit and commercially the companies to benefit. So now here, having engaged with Silicon Valley and the companies, now they're working on ways to build the infrastructure so that optimally India can benefit from 5G and they make more money here. So it's a win-win kind of thing. So now diplomacy is changing into the role that I would like to see myself playing is called techdiplomacy, tech diplomacy. So this is actually very relevant.
Okay. Is there a question on this side of the, yeah?
How long do we get to ask?
1 minute.
Okay. So climate change, we left. Russia, we encouraged the meddling. North Korea, it's just been publicity stunt after another. The Brexit situation, Hong Kong situation, we haven't touched on any of these. In America, America First has led to white supremacy coming back, racism, the highest disparity between rich and poor, and putting kids in cages. So it's not such a good situation in our country right now. So I grew up with democracy meaning free speech, rule of law, free religion. And we had a leadership role in the world, right? Most of my friends live overseas, and I think we're just all disgusted with what America has done. So my question is, with this loss of credibility, what are you guys doing to pick up the slack, basically? You talk about nationalism or your countries being first. What can you do during this, hopefully, blip in our country during this 4-year period? So, I mean, are you going to do things that you normally wouldn't have done in the past? Are there things you can do? And my other question is, what advice are you going to give the next president of the United States? Regardless of who it is, what would you like to see them do? What would you like to see happen?
Who would like to jump in?
I think you have to pose questions whom you want to answer. Who would like
Who
to
would
answer?
like to have answered the question?
See, now you get China first. That's always
I
the
do
case.
not want to comment. It is not our responsibility as diplomat, especially consular officer, to comment on a foreign country's president. But China is one of the largest trading partner of the U.S. And then we find China is the largest trading partner of all 3 countries.
Yes,
And,
yes, correct.
South Korea enjoy big trade surplus. We didn't initiate any trade war because China want to be cooperate with any president the U.S. people elected. China remain unchanged. I think our other three countries remain unchanged, to be cooperative, to be coordinate, to respect each other's co-interest, because we are seeking a win-win situation. Thank you.
Would you like to add?
To answer that question, we also do not sort of interfere with the domestic affairs. That's what American people should choose, whoever the president, and we deal with him. But I think it's what we are doing here is not really kind of a narrow sense of diplomacy, but try to create a good relationship with the community we are living, like Northern California and also California, Nevada. That's what we're trying to do. And we really thank the Asian Society for cooperating with us to achieve our purpose. And coming back to the first question, rather than sort of business things, I also want to share with you that you know already, but we are going to host the Olympic next year. And if you have never really been to Japan, please come. That's a great opportunity. And that will have a start of various other cooperation and interests.
Mr. Park and Mr. Panda, would you like to say?
Yeah, maybe regarding the North Korea's denuclearization issue, you may ask whether Chairman Kim is going to really give up his nuclear program. Actually, leaders of the countries involved in this issue, including President Trump, believes that Chairman Kim has his willingness to give up his nuclear program, and some analysts even say that Chairman Kim has come too far to back off now. Even if it is not the case, we have no other options to keep going down the road with patience until Chairman Kim changes his strategic calculus. At the moment, what we should do is to keep Chairman Kim at the negotiation table and to keep all the other states well coordinated and to keep North Korea under appropriate pressure. And regarding the, sorry? Oh, this one.
So is there anything?
But just one very small sentence. I just wanted to mention that both in India and US, I mean, irrespective of the political spectrum and whoever is, irrespective of whoever is the president in India or prime minister in the US, there's a realization that the world's largest democracy and the oldest democracy has this strategic convergence and have to move together. So that doesn't really matter so far as we are concerned. Okay,
over here. Oh, wait, you, yes? There's a question here and I'll come back to you. Yeah. Fourth row from the back. Yeah. Yes, yes.
Okay, Tian Fen, Chief Architect for BART, local transit here. Question for all of you. All the discussions about American First, Make America Great Again, it seems on impact and influence on externally. So I want to seek your sage advice. By living here, by well-trained diplomats, and have such international affair knowledge, what will be, or what is your observation with the current policy by our current administration? Do you think America can become better from your perspective? If you do, give me any example, economically, socially, or playing golf, whatever you said, really.
Who wants to jump in? No one wants to jump in.
No. No, that's a very tough question for a diplomat to answer, because then you're trying to make us say something, and when media is in the room, the camera is there. So I think I would refrain to comment for saying that every country there is always scope for improvement, and we are working there. Otherwise, we'll become status quoist and we'll stop. Okay, we have reached there, and we don't have to do anything. So, and then we have to have our own innovation and out-of-box thinking of how to run the country. But if you're asking about, okay, my country, there are many things to do. I have to improve quite a lot in many areas, and we have to reach there. And I leave the reflection to you. I mean, I think that's true for every country.
Yeah, go ahead, down the line.
Just one thing. I mean, basic things are the same with Mr. Panda, but one thing that President Trump is attaching importance to is creating jobs. And Japan actually is ready and also making investment, creating a lot of jobs in the United States. That's what I want to say.
I said that the basic line of Trump administration's foreign policy doesn't seem to be very far from the traditional ones. Even so, the press and academicians have pointed out that there are some differences noted by the world. One thing is that the American supremacy in economic and military power is a lot more emphasized, and the bilateralism is also more underscored, and also the linkage between cutting-edge technologies and the national security is perceived to be a lot more closely than ever before. And another thing is that,
To take 15 seconds to finish the thought.
Another thing is that more flexibility and higher risk are being taken by the Trump administration in tackling lingering issues.
We have time for one more question, maybe 1.5. Go ahead. I'd seen your hand up earlier.
I'm a senior vice president for a Silicon Valley technology company, and I've got a client in the UK who's tasking us with launching a design center in China. We've had some conversations.
Come to India.
Is it okay to do that now, or should I wait 6 months? And disagree with every comment this gentleman made earlier, 100%. Now or 6 months from now?
Are you saying because of the trade war?
Yeah. Should I wait for the noise to subside, or should I go now?
Go now.
Well, what do you expect him to do? I mean, a diplomat will say, no, this is not the time.
I've got a lot of checkpoints that I've got to address. The biggest one right now is I've got to build a domain-specific technology team. My client's in the UK. I'm here in Silicon Valley. The team has got interface with Australia. My end market is going to be China low-cost cell phone market. I'm struggling right now with identifying which region. I know Shanghai is out. I can't afford Shanghai. I used to, not anymore. But I don't want all of the other check boxes that I have to check getting in the way. Would it be cleaner, smoother to wait 6 months or go now?
So you got to go now. I'd suggest you talk about it afterward. We've been short on questions from women. There's one here.
Yeah, that's Pasha.
Hi, my name is Tasha Yorozu, and I'm an attorney in San Francisco. My question is to, if possible, to each diplomat. My observation has been that diplomats are usually career diplomats, but this is the United States where it seems like even the government thinks outside the box, and many of its diplomats to some pretty major countries are not career diplomats, but industry experts or just regular private citizens who are very successful in business, who are more or less transaction oriented, or are extremely wealthy. Now, and they have become diplomats, not subject matter experts that diplomats seek advice
We're
from.
going to have to wrap up in
Yeah.
like 2 minutes, so
Yes,
ask the
and-
question quickly and we'll
yes.
get quick answers.
Okay, and so my question is, do you see your countries sending diplomats or considering diplomats who are not career diplomats, who are possibly the types of diplomats that U.S. has been choosing?
I'm leaving,
very quickly.
Very quick. We have been to the United States. We have had those who are not career diplomats, but the trend during the last so many years has been that a career diplomat handles it much better and takes the nuances of the relationship. So we are now, we do have a policy of having career diplomats coming here, but well-trained in various fields. So,
Okay, is that true for each of you, career diplomats?
I
Okay,
have to
so let me just thank you very quickly
Thank you.
for all of you for being here. Thank you all for your attention and for your questions.